From script to screen, every film is brought to life by visionary creatives and executives, all sharing one mission: to captivate the audience. Hosted by award-winning movie strategist Kevin Goetz, our podcast, Don't Kill the Messenger, offers a filmmaking masterclass through intimate conversations with Hollywood's most influential voices. And now, your host, Kevin Goetz.
Time and time again, I have heard the following advice from my guests for people who want to work in the industry. No matter what you think you want to do, get a job at a big agency as an assistant. Listeners, I have no doubt that my guest today agrees. Mike Marcus started in an agency mailroom in the late 60s and quickly rose to represent Hollywood's biggest names, including Robin Williams, Sidney Pollack, John Landis, and Mel Brooks. He helped bring films like The Fisher King, Trading Places, and American Werewolf in London to life before leading MGM Pictures as president and COO, where he oversaw films including Get Shorty, Stargate, and Species. Today, he continues to shape the industry as a manager and producer at Echo Lake Entertainment. Mike, thank you so much for joining me here today.
My pleasure.
Man, we have been through it. I wanted to start with the mailroom because you have been, in your teaching and so forth, a proponent of that path, that career trajectory. Why is that so important?
Well, the mailroom and the agency gives you a background in what the inner working of the business is like, because all of the teaching, all of the classes that you take, nothing prepares you as much as on-the-job training. And you're sitting there at an agency and you're hearing things about you got this to do and this person's involved with this person, working with them. Networking is the most important thing that comes out of working at a big agency, working in a mailroom, and whether it's a big agency or a big management company or even a big production company.
It's kind of the epicenter, isn't it?
Absolutely. And you build a network of people. I still deal with people. Mike Medavoy, a guy that we were just talking before we went on to the podcast. Medavoy was an agent that most people don't remember. And I was in the mailroom and I was about to be promoted to be an agent. And he's one of our associates. And he told me that he was representing this director. And I said, oh, I didn't know agents represented directors. I mean, well, I was pretty dumb in those days, but that's beside the point.
Where'd you come from?
Pittsburgh.
Oh, that explains it. Oh.
Well, exactly. But also, I had no interest or no knowledge of getting into the business. A buddy of mine convinced me to move to California with him.
Who was it?
A guy named Jack Oringer, who died, unfortunately, during COVID.
Oh.
But he was my best friend.
What did he know about the business to suggest that you would be good at it?
Kevin, he convinced me to move to California with him because I wanted him to move to Denver with me because I had been in the service in Denver. And I was getting out of the service, and I said, I want to move to Denver. And I said, move with me. And he said, he can't. He just took a job in his uncle's insurance agency.
So it had nothing to do with our business at all.
Nothing to do with the business. And I had offers from Northwest Mutual, another insurance company, to be an adjuster. And I bumped into a guy who was an agent, and he told me what he did. And I said, that sounds interesting. How do you do that? And he said, well, you can start in the mailroom and you work your way up. And I said, well, okay, what do they pay? And it was $80 a week. And I said, I don't know if I could afford that. But then I thought about it, and I thought, that sounds interesting. And I started interviewing at agencies.
Isn't it amazing how, and Oprah says this a lot, about how moments can inform your entire life? Had that conversation never happened, I'm going to believe that you would have found your way because you're so good at what you do. But isn't it crazy that that kind of alchemy exists?
No question about it. I had no idea about it. One thing did color the decision, because my last term in school, I graduated from Penn State, and I'm still very involved. I'm on 2 boards at Penn State. But my last term, I took a course called The History and the Appreciation of the Motion Picture. Who knew that that would be prescient? Who knew that that would be something that I would look back on and say, oh, film, that's kind of interesting.
Did you love it then when you were in that course?
In the class, I thought it was really interesting because I was not a movie guy. And then I came out of that class being a movie guy.
Do you remember a movie that had particular relevance for you early on?
Yeah, during that class, and my paper in that class was done on The Third Man.
Wow, good choice.
Still one of my favorite movies.
How about as a boy?
There were a few. I got to see Ben-Hur, The Ten Commandments. Audie Murphy, there was a couple of movies that he did.
But bigger epic movies seem to leave an impression on you.
Yeah, I don't know that I was that conscious of it.
What did you like as a kid? What formed the man that you are today?
It's a good question. I don't think anybody has ever asked me that. I like sports. I'm a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And I was a fan of the Pittsburgh Hornets, the hockey team.
Going back to your agency days, who were your early mentors? Who really had an influence on, again, who you became?
Medavoy and a literary agent by the name of Mike Wise. They taught me that writers and directors were represented by agents, and that was an eye-opener to me. And I just gravitated towards that much more than actors, which is where I started. And the other one was a guy by the name of Mickey Freiberg, who was a young agent, who, when I was promoted to agent, after being an assistant for about 4 months, and this is way faster than I should have been promoted, and I didn't really know what I was doing, and he kind of took me under his wing. And I was really lucky. About 5 years later, 6 years later, I was able to hire him at Conor Levy Marcus.
That's when you became a partner. So you moved from which agency initially?
Initially, it was a place called General Artists Corporation, GAC, which merged with CMA and took the name CMA, Creative Management. And after I left, it became ICM. CMA was started by two ex-MCA agents, David Bigelman and Freddie Fields.
Well, that's a whole nother topic because there's a lot of Hollywood lore surrounding the two of those guys.
Mr. Bigelman especially.
Especially. I want to ask you, who was your first significant signing?
My first significant sign that stayed with me and helped make my career was Landis.
Wow.
Because it was about 1973. At those days, it was called Bart Levy and Associates. And I was able to sign John. All he had done was a little movie called Schlock. And he actually played the Schlockthropus monster in it. He made it for $60,000. And I thought he was really talented. But more than being talented, I thought his energy was great. And I thought he was really special. And then we put him into Kentucky Fried Movie, and the rest was history.
George Folsey is a mutual friend of ours who just passed away. And in fact, you called me to tell me the news. I'm so blessed and honored that I got to interview George on this program before he died. And it was, I think, cathartic in a way for him because he told me so. But it was great to memorialize some of those stories that really cemented his relationship with John Landis, you know?
Oh, yeah. They went on to be partners as an editor and a producer for many, many movies.
What was packaging movies like in those days? That was an early practice, wasn't it?
Yeah. One of the things that interested me the most about writers and directors was that you start films with writers and directors. For the most part, actors come in later. And I like the idea of putting things together. So I started very early on introducing my writers to my directors and directors to actors. And I packaged a lot of movies over the years.
So you would actually come into Paramount with the writer, the director, probably not the star at that point, and the producer.
It depended. Bill Forsyth was a client of mine who directed Local Hero, wrote Local Hero, and a number of other movies.
I love that movie so much.
A lot of people do. Bill wrote a script, and I read it, and I thought Robin Williams would be great in it. I called Robin. After I talked to Bill, I said...
You represented Robin?
I represented Robin for 6 years before I left to go to MGM. I was representing his managers, Amora, Bressner, Steinberg, and Tenenbaum.
Sure.
And the guys were representing Robin as managers. And they put him into Good Morning Vietnam. I signed him off of Good Morning Vietnam.
I'm sure everyone wanted him.
We were lucky. Ovitz helped me and another one of my associates, Mike Menschel. So the three of us were his team.
He's a terrific guy, Mike Menschel.
Yeah. Robin called us the Dolby Mikes. So I gave the script to Forsyth. He loved the idea of Robin. I gave it to Robin. Robin said, Mike, I'll do it. I said, well, you haven't read Being Human script yet. He said, I was offered Local Hero and I didn't do it. So I will definitely do this. I then set about trying to put it together. I brought in David Putnam to produce it, who had produced a lot of Forsythe movies.
Oh, didn't he ultimately go to Columbia and do Chariots of Fire?
Yeah. I think actually Putnam had already gone to Columbia and now was back as a producer, if I remember correctly. So I gave it to Putnam, and then he took it to Warner Brothers as a fully packaged movie ready to go. And I got Bill more money for his writing and directing on that than the budgets of some of his early films. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out very well. Warner's didn't do anything with it.
Very interesting. Let me ask you about the transition from your name on the door to going to CAA?
Mike Levy was my partner at Conner Levy Marcus.
Right.
We decided, because this company, CAA, was beating us all the time and signing new clients, that we had to get into the 21st century. So we went to Paul Conner, who was our partner, and we said, look, we've got to hire business affairs people. We've got to get into new offices, because we had a little shop on Main Street. And he said, we got to build. And he said, what build? I'm 85 years old.
A legend, Paul Conner.
Yeah, and it was wonderful. But Mike Levy and I started putting together Levy Marcus. And Levy was hired by CBS to be the chairman of the CBS Theatrical Films Group in early 1981. And all of a sudden, I was a free ball, and every agency was coming after me. And I ended up at CAA from 81 to 93.
So CAA was really where you really spread your wings.
Exactly. Although I did come to CAA with John Landis, David Cronenberg, a number of very important clients.
Not too shabby.
Yeah. Richard Marquand, who did the third of the original Star Wars movies, Return of the Jedi. Irv Kershner, who directed the second one.
Empire Strikes Back, yeah.
And Eric Berkovici, who wrote the original Shogun. So I came in with a decent client list, but I built it from there, obviously.
You preferred to represent directors and writers from that point as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You were always more literary.
It really was. And at that point, 6 years into my term at CAA, because of my representing the producers of Good Morning Vietnam, I was introduced to their client, Robin, and I was able to bring him into the company.
Wow.
And eventually, I ended up, for the last 2 years of my term at CAA, I was involved with Tom Cruise.
With Paula, who was a guest on this program.
Paula left to join him in the business that they put together. There was a guy that was given the opportunity to represent Tom, and he didn't work out, so I took over for the last 2 years.
And Rick was there too, but Rick never handled Tom, right?
Not that I'm aware of.
By the way, Paul Conner, wasn't his daughter Susan Conner from Imitation of Life?
Not only that, but his grandchildren were Paul and Chris Weitz, the Weitz brothers.
No way.
Yeah. So I've known the Weitz brothers since they were little kids running around the arcade.
Oh, my God. I love the connective tissue here.
But what I said at the beginning, networking. I can still pick up the phone and call Chris and Paul, and they always pick up the phone for me.
Of course.
It's building relationships. It's a people business.
100%. Did you know that from the start? Were you that way growing up as a young guy? Were you always like a charmer? Were you a schmoozer? Were you a bullshitter? What?
I was probably a schmoozer. Yeah.
I was going to ask you what your superpower is.
Talking.
Talking about smart things.
Hopefully. Although I can tell a good joke, too.
But you were able to seduce people to have them trust you to manage their careers. That's a tall order, especially with so much competition around. So, moving on to the story about the transition from agenting to getting that call to run MGM. How did that come about?
I got a call from Ovitz's office to come in and see him. I walk in, and Mike gives me a hand signal to wait. And I'm standing there in front of his desk because he's on a call. He hangs up the phone, and I go to pull the chair out, and he said, no, walk over with me to the seating area. Well, it was a long, thin office. And as I'm walking over to the seating area, I'm going through every client in the back of my mind to make sure there's something that I'm not missing. Why would Mike want to talk to me sitting down in his seating area and not just have a quick verbal conversation? But we sit down, and he said, okay, listen, I've been talking to Frank Mancuso, And Frank wants to talk to you about being the head of MGM. And I said, yeah, Mike, sure. What do you want to talk to me about? And he said, no, I'm serious. And I said, come on, Mike. And eventually he convinced me that Frank wanted to talk to me about it.
Why would Frank want to talk to you about that as an agent? What was it about either you or Mike's recommending you for that job?
Two things. Number one, I was very good at building relationships with heads of studios, whether they were head of distribution, head of production, chairman, and I had courted Mancuso and I had gotten to know him. And he had told me in one of my meetings, he says, I don't like agents much, but you're okay. So number two, I was a packager. I put together a lot of movies over the years. And, a lot of them are on the screen behind you, whether it's Dead Ringers or American Werewolf or Being Human, which we just talked about, and Fisher King. There were a lot of movies that I put together, and it was known that I was a packager.
Ah, you knew how to put movies together, and you knew how to galvanize people.
Correct.
I'm trying to get into the superpower and crystallize it. By the end of this will be like a therapy session. You'll say, I guess that's what I'm really great at.
I'm good at schmoozing and putting people together.
Yeah, but you see the strength of the parts and bringing those parts together to create something. And that is a huge skill that not a lot of people possess. And you possessed it.
It's remembering relationships. It's like when I put together Fisher King, Medavoy was doing Fisher King, and I read the script, and I loved it. I thought it would be great for Robin. And I gave it to him, and I got him to read it. I said, did you read it? He said, yeah, I read it. Well, what do you want to do? He said, well, I'm not going to commit to it. I said, well, why not? He said, well, there's no director. So Linda Obst and Deborah Hill and Menschel and I had a meeting about finding a director. And the thought popped into my mind, okay, he just did a film with Terry Gilliam. Why not see if Terry would do it with him? So we went to Terry Gilliam. He read it. He loved it. I called Robin and I said, Robin, Terry Gilliam wants to do Fisher King. Robin said, okay, I'll do it. Simple as that.
Wow.
Remembering that Robin loved working with Terry was the key. This is all documented in Linda's book, Hello, I Lied.
Yeah. Linda just passed away, who we both had a very, very strong and close relationship with.
Very sad.
And I miss her very much.
Yeah.
I loved her.
Her and Paula Weinstein, big losses.
I know. I'm in her second book. I think I have like a half a chapter or something that she wrote. She revered research and what I did. And we really became quite close. So a call out to Linda. If you were alive, my God, you'd be my guest in the middle of the night if you wanted to be. Mike, if you don't mind, we are going to take a break, but when we come back, I really want to hear about the transition that you made from agenting to becoming an executive and how it changed putting projects together, if at all. We'll be back in a moment. Listeners, the Motion Picture and Television Fund is a nonprofit charitable organization that supports working and retired members of the entertainment community. This wonderfully run organization offers assistance for living and aging with dignity and purpose in the areas of health and social services, including temporary financial assistance, case management, and residential living, and has been a crucial lifeline to thousands during and beyond critical times that our industry continues to experience. To learn more, visit mptf.com. Please join me in helping others in our industry during times of need. There are so many ways to offer support and get involved. Thank you. We're back with Mike Marcus. Mike, going back to your start at MGM, were you nervous taking that job? Louis B. Mayer, man.
Well, sure, absolutely. Okay, so I finally was convinced by Ovitz that I should meet with Frank. I call my wife and she picks up the phone. Where are you? I'm over at my friend's. Why? I said, well, go home. Well, why should I go home? Because I need to talk to you. And she said, about what? I said, don't, just go home.
I hope you said it. This is not bad.
I did. I said it was not bad.
Okay.
So, but by the time I drove home, I had convinced myself I wanted the job. I had never thought about being the head of a studio, but I had convinced myself, let's take a shot. And the thought process was a bit like, all right, how many people on the face of the earth have ever run a movie studio? So I thought, okay, I've got a great career, but I've done everything I can do as an agent. There wasn't much left for me to do as an agent. So why not do that? And I was thrilled to do it. And I had a great meeting with Mancuso. We made the deal. I started in September of 93. And frankly, the thought that kept going through my mind was that what I did as an agent was what I would be doing as the head of a studio, putting movies together. So I really wasn't nervous. I didn't think about, oh my God, this is such pressure. I thought, I got to make some movies.
Who'd you hire right away?
Greg Foster and David Ladd were there, and I kept them. I ended up hiring Elizabeth Seldes, who coincidentally, and Mark Protasevich, and Mark wasn't a writer yet. So I hired Elizabeth and Mark, and I saw them both at the Writers Guild Awards the Saturday before this past Saturday, where Elizabeth was nominated and Mark was nominated.
Incredible.
Great picture of the three of us together. And Elizabeth won a Writers Guild Award. So that was my team. And while I was there at MGM, Mark handed me a script called The Cell. And I bought it. I wasn't able to make it before I left, and they put it in turnaround, and it got made by New Line.
What other movies did you do at MGM? You picked up Stargate, which was a big hit, wasn't it?
Stargate was very successful. We had a lot of fights with the director about the edit.
That was Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin. But they really saved that movie, didn't they?
Absolutely, because what happened was Joe Nimzicki was one of our marketing guys, who you must know very well.
Of course.
Roland was so pissed off at Joe, he named one of the bad guys in one of his movies.
Nimzicki.
Yeah.
I remember that. I cannot believe that. Oh, God. But Joe was so right about it. Listen, leave it to the pros, man. You know, Tony Sella was just a guest on the show. And to let great creatives do what they do. We just lost another great call out to Chris Pula. These are amazing giants who really understood how to market.
Yeah. And Jerry Rich worked with us, and Joe Nimzicki, yeah.
Fantastic. Let me ask you about the difficulties on Stargate, because we tested that movie.
Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to say.
Tell me.
Initially, the numbers were terrible.
Terrible.
What came back was, none of this makes any sense.
Correct.
And what they had done was, Roland had the characters speaking Aramaic, I think it was, and it was all accurate. And we said, okay, we don't need subtitles that are accurate. We need subtitles that help get the story. So we had them rewrite the subtitles. And then the next time it was tested, you did it, and it was perfect. It was great.
Well, also, if I recall, the other big change was this portal. They didn't know like where they were coming from. Or they created much clearer movie rules about the transport, right?
Right.
Through this portal. And anyway, it was a great story of listening to the audience and making changes based on that. What's your relationship to research, Mike? I've seen you at hundreds, low hundreds of screenings throughout your career. Tell me what you think about the audience, how you embrace research, and to what degree.
Well, it's been a learning process for me, because back in the day when I first was putting together movies, I was a guy who was a fly-by-night guy. I would do everything by my stomach. I have learned that research helps.
How so?
Well, okay, so let's say you want to buy a script. To get the script concept judged by research isn't a bad way to go. There's a lot of reasons why research is helpful in making a movie and in distributing a movie. And getting the focus groups that you lead or have led over the years have been, I think, instrumental in helping filmmakers understand things. Now, the guy who directed The Brutalist would probably argue with me because he expects to get final cut of everything he does. But I still think it's a collaborative business, and there's a lot of
absolutely
input.
As Tom Rothman likes to say, even if a filmmaker has final cut really belongs with the audience.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So I'm very curious to see what the next film that this guy who did The Brutalist turns out to be
Yeah, he
like.
kind of got up in front of everyone at I think it was the
Golden
Globes,
Globe.
and
Yeah.
said, listen, no one thought a 3-hour and 40-minute movie could ever be seen. I actually thought the movie moved rather well. So I don't think he would have gotten that much crap for having a long movie. If the movie deserves to be long and epic, so be it.
Sure.
But the problem is some movies are way too indulgent. And also, that movie still has to make a lot of money to even make its small budget back. So it's challenging, It's not an easy answer. You've seen the evolution of changes. I like to talk about television before your time. We moved to television from radio, and then we moved from black and white to color. And then we've had several evolutions or revolutions. One of the biggest, of course, was the home entertainment movement, where people thought it was the end of the movie business. But of course, more movies begot more movies. And yet the studios still controlled the messaging always, meaning you've got these 3 choices coming out, take it or leave it. The street date for this video is coming out here, take it or leave it. There were a lot of choices you could make if you went to a Blockbuster. But it really fed the whole ecosystem. Then we got into sort of smart TVs and the advent of cable proliferation. And again, lots and lots of choice available. And yet movies thrived because it was a very special experience than television and cable. But then the streaming disruption happened. And I contend that's when 3 things converged: cost, convenience, and choice, 3 C's. And that is almost a disruptor that is irreparable. And I don't mean to say that movies are dead and streaming is the only thing that's going to exist, but clearly consumers in their lives had 3 elements to consider that had never been together at that level. The idea that you could spend $65 for 4 tickets to a movie for a family of 4 versus 7 subscription services, cost, convenience, you don't have to leave your home, babysitter, lines, people, disgusting floors in theaters, and choice, because of the amount of choices is unbelievable with the streamers. Where do you stand with this whole transition, and how have you found your place in this new world order?
I've always felt that movies will always exist in theaters because at some point, mothers and fathers will want to get out of the house away from the kids. At some point, the kids are going to want to get out of the house away from the parents. And movies are a logical place for them to go. So I think they're always going to be. Now, admittedly, COVID kind of put a problem into the life of the theater, no question about it. But I think people are starting to go back to the theater. They're getting back into the routine of going back to a theater. And I think it's working quite well, slowly but surely. Will it ever be to the height of what it used to be? I don't know. I don't think so.
Why do you not think so?
Because I think streaming does make a difference. I mean, for my wife and I, I'm going to be 80 this year. My wife's going to be 77. We pick and choose the movies we go to in the theater because it's just a drag for us to drive from where we live to the theater. So a lot of times we just as soon watch a movie at home. But we do still get to the theater, but nonetheless, it has just made life a little simpler to be able to watch some of these films on television.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. One has to embrace the fact that it's not so much the business that has changed. In other words, the business is still really good at making content, marketing it, and distributing it. It's the consumer has changed. The customer has changed.
Oh, sure.
And unless you react and realize that, I like to look, as opposed to women and men over a certain age, I like to look generationally, from Alpha to Gen Z to Millennial to Gen X to Baby Boomer. That has more of a relevance in terms of being a digital native or a digital adopter, and also somebody who has a nostalgic relationship with the movie theater, like you and I do, because it had a different feeling, and we have great memories, and much of our life was informed where we were watching those movies, like music in many ways, isn't it?
And I mean, going to the theater is an experience. My wife and I went to see Get Out in the theater years ago. There's a scene in the movie that is really scary. And my wife out loud says, uh-oh. And the whole audience cracked up. I mean, that's movie going,
Yeah.
you know?
I remember seeing Bridges of Madison County, and some woman in the audience said, "Open it, the car door." Or
Yeah.
she might have said, "Don't open it, don't open it." I forget. But everyone lost their shit because it was so funny.
And that's the beauty of going to the movie theater.
How do you still stay relevant, Mike, in this day and age? You're 80 years old. You've managed to have a 55-year career in this business.
On March 1st, it will be 57 years since I started in the mailroom.
My God. Okay, 57-year career. And yet you seem as relevant now as you were. How?
Because I'm too dumb to retire.
No, there's something else. You must be evolving with the times. First of all, you still must love it.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Exactly. But let's say that to folks. I mean, if you don't love something, you're not going to be very good at it or relevant.
Listen, I've never once doubted the choice to get into the business. I've had a blast. I've had success. I can't complain. It is a lot of fun, and I've had fun building companies. On December 1st, it'll be 20 years since I started Echo Lake Management, the management division of Echo Lake Entertainment. I was consulting for them, and my partner said, look, if I put up the money, would you start a management company and run it with me? And that was almost 20 years ago.
Is that Doug Mankoff?
Doug Mankoff, right. And we've had a great partnership. We've had a lot of success. I've got 18 managers working for me.
Wow.
I've had more fun building the company than, in some cases, dealing with some of the clients.
What makes a great rep? Why is someone a really good representative for a director, a writer, an actor?
I think a part of it is empathy. I think that you have to listen to them and understand where they're coming from and what's going on in their lives, and think about what would satisfy them. I've given scripts to clients that they passed on, and I kind of understood going in that they probably would. And then I've given scripts to clients that I was fairly certain that they would like it, and they did.
What keeps you up at night? Anything?
Not really. I'm not a pressure guy. I'm not a guy who sits and goes over and over and over things.
Is the business headed in a good direction?
That is a very, very good question, Kevin, and I don't know the answer to that. I think there's aspects of it that aren't good. I think there's aspects of it that are good.
Let's unpack that for a second. Where in the business is there opportunity, and where is it positive? Where are things going that you're excited about?
There seems to be the potential, based on some feedback I've gotten from some of my folks that went to the Berlin Film Festival, that television is not as interesting as features are. So I believe there's going to be a resurgence in the independent film business. So that's exciting. I like the idea that film can get energized again. And with films like Emilia Perez and Anora and Brutalist and some of the other Academy-nominated movies that are very inexpensive movies, I think that's an indication that independent films have not died out. So I think that's exciting. I think that there's still some figuring out that the streamers have to do as to how and when to stream television series and movies, and what deserves to be in the theater and what doesn't. And I think that's all going to shake out soon as people understand what it means. I mean, this whole thing with the James Bond situation is fascinating, given the fact that the Bond franchise could be a whole other thing for Amazon MGM.
Whole universe.
Whereas with the Broccolis, it was going to be a movie every so often, because that's the way they wanted to do it. And I think they just convinced Barbara enough craziness, and I think enough pressure on her to make a movie. And I think also her relationship with Michael Wilson, her stepbrother, was very symbiotic. They were very close. And I think the fact that he's 83, he was ready to give it all up.
Absolutely.
I have no knowledge as to whether this is correct or not.
Yeah.
I'm speculating.
Where do you think the business is most vulnerable, and what do we need to be worried about?
I hate the contracting of the industry has done to writers and directors and actors' salaries. So these people, for the most part, are not making the kind of money they used to make. And I think, therefore, it is tougher on writers, it's tougher on the representatives. So the guys that work for me are great and they're doing a great job. They're not going to make the kind of money I've made over the years. And why is that? Because the clients aren't making the kind of money that they used to make.
Any kind of worry about AI?
Yeah, to a degree, but people are so cognizant of it. I think there's going to be a lot of people studying it. And as it starts to take people's jobs away, I mean, the truth is you could make a movie without an actor, without a writer, and without a director. Somebody could just come in and set it up with AI, but would people like it? I don't know. I've read some AI scripts and AI coverage, and there's no heart, there's no soul to these things.
Can you tell me, Mike, because I always like to get sort of underneath the surface in these episodes, what was a mistake you've made in your career that you maybe regret, but learned from? It could be personal, it could be in the business, but it's something that I kind of wanted that first gut reaction to.
I've been asked it before. I think at the time when I was at MGM, I got into a fight with Mancuso that was stupid of me, which I think led to my not having my option picked up for a second 4 years. And I think I regret that. Although, as it turns out, maybe being the guy that made big superhero movies wouldn't have been what I did anyhow. I wasn't going to be that guy. I didn't think that was for me. But nonetheless, I regret having that fight with Frank, although we have certainly reconciled a lot.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that, because I'm really crazy about Frank and both.
Frank's great. And it was stupid of me to have gotten into the fight I got into with him. Second of all, I was offered by Sherry Lansing an overall deal when I left MGM. And I didn't take it, and I went in business instead with MBST. Moore, Bresner, Steinberg, and Tenenbaum joined their management company. And that was not a smart move on my part. I like the guys, terrific guys, but they didn't want to grow and build anything. They were pretty set in their ways. So that was probably a mistake. But as it turned out, had I taken the overall deal with Sherry, eventually I wouldn't have met Doug and I wouldn't have been able to build Echo Lake. So I can't really call that a major mistake. In retrospect, going with MBST probably wasn't the smartest thing in the world for me.
Wow. How long has it been? 18 years at Echo Lake?
It'll be 20 on the 1st of December.
Wow. I mean,
yeah.
That's a successful relationship.
And in the 57 years I've been doing this, that is my longest place anywhere. And the CAA was the second longest.
Do you think we have an obligation to give back when we reach a certain level of success?
Oh, I don't think there's any question.
It was a leading question because I knew that you did, and I know that you do, and I know. But tell me about what you're involved with now.
Well, I'm a Academy member, so I mentor people through Academy Gold, which is their mentorship program.
I've done that. It's so fulfilling.
It is very fulfilling. I also am on 2 boards at Penn State, both the Dean's Advisory Council for the overall College of Communications, as well as I'm the chair of the Hollywood campus for Penn State. And I've thought they've been great. And I've brought in a number of interns from Penn State. I have 2 that are interns for us right now. And so I've worked with the interns. I speak to the interns. And I even did a commencement address for Penn State one year.
Oh, marvelous. What are you most excited coming up on your either clients of yours or personally that you're producing? Anything you can speak about?
I've been working on something with the client of mine, Howie Deutsch, for a number of years.
Oh, man. Howie Deutsch.
Yeah.
Great. And Leah.
We've come close 3 or 4 times. We got the financing put together to develop the script further, and that worked out. And then the company that did it went bankrupt, so we had to get the script back. Then I had another company that was interested in it, and that didn't work. And then another company was interested in it, and that didn't work. So now we have another situation where we can potentially get it made. We've got Shirley MacLaine starring in it, and we just want to get it done before too late.
Brad Furman was just a guest, and he just did a picture with Shirley and said that it was one of the best experiences he's ever had in his life.
The few conversations I've had with her about this film, she's a firecracker. She's amazing.
Oh, man. I love the fact that you are working with a Howie Deutsch or any of these filmmakers who've had wonderful success and haven't been able to get a movie made, and that you're still keeping that fight going. You have to, because there's such talent out there. There's such great
No question.
talent. I revere age and experience. I have to tell you, I go out of my way to hire for it, to learn from it, because it only benefits me. You know what I mean? Because there's so much I can gain from people that have paid their dues, if you will.
Sure. Experience is everything. I rarely run into a problem that I haven't seen before.
Isn't that great?
Yeah, very rarely.
Problems that you maybe learned from the mailroom.
Exactly.
That looked or seemed insurmountable probably back then, probably now feel like, oh, easy peasy.
It takes a good 10 years to really know what you're doing, in my opinion.
Oh.
And then once you do, you just incrementally build from there. And again, like I said, nothing surprises me anymore.
You know, it's so funny you said that, because when I talk to a lot of my friends who have kids in their 20s, which is a very challenging time right now to have kids in your 20s, because the attitudinal changes are so large and so vast. We had to lay a stake pretty quickly out of college. And I tell them, folks, there are no mistakes that kids can make in their 20s. In other words, they're all opportunities for growth and learning and living to get you to a place in your, say, early 30s where you do lay that stake. And people are living longer now, et cetera, et cetera.
That's the key. Living longer is the answer, because when I was a kid, people were retiring at 65. You almost had to retire. The reason they put 65 as the retirement age for Medicare was because people didn't live much longer than that. Now, I mean, I'm going to be 80 and I'm healthy, and there's a good chance I might make it to 90. My friend Fred Spector is 91. He'll be 92 in April.
He hasn't lost anything, Fred.
He's still an agent. He's still going in every day.
He's the best, man.
Richard Lovett had to tell him, if I see you in the office on a Friday, you're fired, just to get him to pull back a little bit.
He's the greatest.
And that's a true story. You can check with Fred. So you cannot make a mistake. Go for it. Give it a shot. Try it. Doesn't work, start all over again.
I say it's not a jail sentence.
Exactly.
Mike Marcus, you're such an important part of our business, the fabric of it, what you've accomplished. It's so extraordinary, and you've affected so many lives in our town. And I thank you for joining me today. It's been an honor.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. I've had a lot of fun. I appreciate you and appreciate our relationship over the years.
To our listeners, I hope you enjoyed our interview today. I encourage you to watch many of the films discussed in today's interview. For more filmmaking and audience testing stories, I invite you to check out my book, Audienceology, at Amazon, or through my website at kevingetz360.com. You can also follow me on my social media. Next time on Don't Kill the Messenger, I'll welcome a legend in the world of visual effects, Scott Ross. Until then, I'm Kevin Goetz, and to you, our listeners, I appreciate you being part of the movie-making process. Your opinions matter.